We have some breaking news, don't we, boys and girls? Hello, everyone. My name is Luke Thomas. Welcome. Okay, so I'm actually in my hotel in Las Vegas. I'm normally at home and able to break this down in my office, but I am actually on the ground. I was at the Canelo and Jaime Munguia presser today. Yes, I saw all the fireworks between Canelo and obviously Oscar De La Hoya, but we're not here to talk about that. Breaking news, this comes to us from Dan Rayfield. Dan Rayfield has his own Substack, but formerly of ESPN, USA Today. A very reliable reporter, by the way. He was on my flight out to here. We fist bumped. Shouts to Big Dan. Here it is. I'm going to put the tweets on the screen as I read this to you. Again, I'm trying to put this all together in my hotel room. Breaking, Dan Rayfield writes, per multiple sources with knowledge of the results, Ryan Garcia tested positive for the banned PED Ostarine in a VADA test. That's the Voluntary Anti-Doping Association, related to the Haney fight. Okay, so this is bad. A lot to get to, but let me finish up what he writes. He says again, Garcia positive tests per source with direct knowledge failed for Ostarine in 2 urine results on April 19th, which would be the day before the fight, and then post-fight April 20th, so again, the day of the fight, but just after the fight itself. April 19th sample, also from the VADA letter, quote, screened positive, but was not confirmed for 19 norandrosterone. I'm sure I'm saying that compound totally wrong, but it is nandrolone, I believe, pending IRMS analysis currently being run. So by the way, not only did he pop positive for 1, according to this VADA results, but potentially 2. There's more. Last from Big Dan Rayfield, Ryan Garcia has 10 days to ask for a B sample to be tested at his own expense, so not only blows weight by 3.2 pounds, he also apparently was dirty for a PED and possibly 2. Okay, so there's a million things to get to with this. Let's start counting them. First of all, I'm just going to go in the order of things that make sense to me. It should be noted that Ostarine contamination in ordinary sports supplements is very, very common. In fact, it happens to UFC fighters, at least it has happened to UFC fighters all the time. Most recently, Daniel Rodriguez, a UFC welterweight, he was announced to have a positive test back in October, but they cut his punishment down to 3 months in December because they made an announcement then as well, and they noted that, listen, he was able to prove contamination wasn't intentional, so you get this sort of very minor suspension. Obviously, UFC does not use USADA anymore, but it just goes to illustrate how common it is. It just happened. And by the way, you can think of a million different fighters that this happened to. Kyler Phillips, Sean O'Malley, the list goes on and on. Just type in UFC fighters and Ostarine. You'll see all kinds of cases of a genuine verified contamination. So that thing does really happen. I know this doesn't look good for Garcia, and we'll talk about that element, but if we are looking for due process, and we have not heard from Garcia at this point, but if we're looking for due process, if we're looking to see, what are some wider facts and context of the case, is it true that Ostarine contamination among combat sports athletes who end up working with anti-doping agencies, is it true that they relatively routinely run into Ostarine contamination? The answer is very much yes, that they do. So, worth considering. Okay, so now you might also be asking, what is Ostarine? I'm no chemist. This is not my area of expertise. I encourage you to look up any potentially valuable source you can find on the internet, but a basic idea would be to look at Ostarine. It's a SARM, it's a selective androgen receptor modulator, and so it's a whole class of compounds, but the idea would be that it can certainly help with recovery, it can help with muscle growth. I mean, there's a lot of things that it can do, and this is pharmaceutical grade stuff. Now, that second thing he has allegedly popped for, which is awaiting further testing, this is basically a metabolite of nandrolone. Okay, so a nandrolone, again, not a chemist, not anything more than that, but this is a clear anabolic steroid, right? We're talking, again, pharmacy grade compounds, and this is something that any kind of performance athlete is obviously going to be looking into in all different kinds of walks of life. Just look up nandrolone and positive tests or anti-doping. You will see that it is a very common thing that athletes have tested positive for on the bad side. And then that thing that they're waiting on to see if he popped for a second steroid or a second PED anyway is the IRMS. This is the isotope ratio mass spectrometry. This is basically a test that allows them to see if sometimes you can administer an endogenous substance, something that is naturally occurring from within, but you can do it from an exogenous way. So it's like it's put in from the outside unnaturally. This can kind of tell you if that is what has happened here. So they're waiting to see if that result ultimately implicates Garcia or not. That's what they're waiting on to find out. But like a couple of things here that you should think about, right? He missed by 3.2 pounds, and there's an interview that I think Fight Hype did with one of the cornermen of Devin Haney, like right after the fight. And listen, they kind of admitted that they got whooped. I mean, again, I didn't see it coming, and Lord knows, we all witnessed what happened. But he believed, this was just his impression post-fight, he believed that weight miss by Garcia was intentional. Not just intentional, like the exact weight was intentional. Because his point was, if you get pretty close but you go over the line, the commission's going to ask you to keep cutting weight. But if you're too far over and you're into the next weight class or close to it, the commission will just call the whole fight off. So what he argues is that he actually hit that 3.2 on purpose. It wasn't close enough that the commission would ask him to keep making weight. It was too far away. At the same time, though, it wasn't too far for them to call the whole fight off. It was right in that mid-range. And he believed that that was intentional. Was it intentional? You can decide that. You can decide if that's sour grapes. You can decide if that's nonsense. The point I'm trying to make here, though, is that if before the fight, and then before we discovered certainly this possibility, here's what I'm trying to help you understand. If, in fact, he took PEDs, now that's an if, but if he did, you have to review the weight miss now as something more than unintentional negligence. Like any presumption of innocence that he could have before the fight, I think you now remove that. That is not, again, you're removing the presumption of innocence. You're not removing the innocence per se. We don't know what the facts are. We're just getting this information now. But if there was an automatic, that sounds plausible, but it also sounds conspiratorial, the weight miss, let's just sort of assume that he just didn't get it right. You lose that, in my judgment. You lose that. You can't commit this cascade of what appears to be errors, all of which are entirely self-inflicted, presuming that this anti-doping violation proves lasting. They're all self-inflicted. No one did any of those things ostensibly to him. So there is a real question about to what extent were these things, again, did you miss weight and you happen to take contaminated supplements? That's plausible. I don't know how likely it is, but it's certainly plausible. But if you missed weight and just in a specific kind of way that provides potentially some competitive advantage, and then also you tested positive for a SARM, and then also potentially another pharmacy-grade compound, we need to review the terms of that weight miss in a way that we weren't all necessarily doing after the fight. Also, dude, what is Devin Haney going to do here? I mean, you had an opponent who, again, let's look back on this, who missed weight, whether it was negligent or not, you can decide. But again, I think he loses the presumption of innocence here. So let's see what, any further information about that becomes available. And more to the point, now you have this SARM and this potential other anabolic steroid that has been flagged. If you're Devin Haney, I don't know exactly what legal options that he has in the state of New York, but what I would say is you should pay attention to that angle of the story. These are contracts that these guys sign. We've seen something with Mark Hunt, which was he was trying to argue that basically the judge ruled against Mark Hunt because Mark wanted to argue it was not reasonable to expect that any opponent you could have could be on steroids, and the court disagreed with him. That wouldn't necessarily be changed here, although one never knows if another court would agree, but more to the point that the twofer, that the missing of the weight and of these potential PED violations, I wonder what legal recourse through the commission or potentially otherwise he might have to say that this guy was totally in breach of contract and caused enormous physical damage as a consequence. That will be a story to potentially, or an angle of the story certainly, to potentially follow, no doubt about it. And last but not least, there's a question about what this does to Ryan Garcia. You guys know my position on PEDs. I don't think they're great necessarily. The question is just what rules that the athletes have a say in helping craft, and ultimately what they want in the end. Like if there's a broad agreement that the fighters want anti-doping, I don't think I should stand in the way. But if they don't agree and they believe there should be some more protections for them, like you see in the other sports leagues, I don't think that's a bad thing either. Okay, neither here nor there. You have to decide how you feel about this. But I wonder what this does to the Ryan Garcia kind of underdog story. And of course, he was kind of the pretty boy of boxing too. But heading into this, I counted him out. I counted him out. Excuse me. Many parts of the boxing community counted him out. Lots of people counted him out. And then, yeah, he missed weight, but he had this like triumphant performance against the toughest guy, basically. Well, not Tank's the toughest guy, but this pound for pound established talent. And he has this like he shines on like the biggest stage possible. And you thought that well maybe the judges were going to rob him, and they didn't. I mean, it was truly triumphant. What does this do to undercut that now? What does this do to challenge how people see that victory? Do they see it as authentic? Do they now have more sympathy for Devin Haney? Like, there's a bunch of questions about what this does to image, what this does to the value of that victory, what this does to Ryan Garcia's potential future. He still is just 25 years old. He's got a lot of time, but what could happen as a result of this? There's just enormous implications from this story. So MK tomorrow, this is a breaking news video, but MK tomorrow, we're going to have it. So talking about this and everything else, what a crazy moment. I'll see you guys then. Leave a comment. Does this change your view about Ryan Garcia? Let me know. Luke Thomas. I'll talk to you all later. I'm out.